going into the marriage, her family is Sunni, my family is Shia. So that was like a big like roadblock with families. Like you can say like me and Farheen are on the same page, and we knew we were on the same page before going into it, right? But obviously families, older generations might not necessarily 100% understand or be as liberal with their views and such. So that was a big challenge. And but that's something we knew we'd overcome because I think I
feel like we went through that before our parents went through it. So we had that trial and we came to our agreement and like our understanding of how we're gonna work things out and if it's possible to work things out. And for us, like we already went through all that. So like when we had to introduce this issue to our parents, it was like we had to do it all over again, and it was from our parents' perspective. So like it's a lot different to like get them to understand something that they have lived their whole life than it is for.
And your parents only want the best for you, and they think they know what's best for you, which is right. But then at the same time, they might not necessarily understand the other side of it, because my parents didn't know her and her parents didn't know me, but already there were like prejudices already kind of there. You know what I mean? Like, oh, she's Sunni, he's Shia.
The major issue was us having different like sectarian backgrounds with our families. Like from my end, it was like I did have to break the news to my parents. I don't know how I did it. I feel like it was just one day, like when I told my parents about Mustafa, I was like, hey, like remember, my parents knew him. We were friends since high school and stuff. My mom did. So I told my mom, like, okay, like me and Mustafa are like serious, like we want to get married and whatnot. And I just kind of like slipped it in there. I was like, oh, by the way, Shia. And my mom was just like, what does that mean? Like, what are the implications? Like I now have to break it down to her, like, hey, Shia, it doesn't mean all of these things that you think it means. It's like, actually, it's this. We knew our parents weren't gonna be like, okay, you cannot get married. Like I knew my parents knew his parents, and like we knew that the outcome was gonna be fine. It's just we had to get them there, like because of their willingness, not because like we forced them to do it.
I think Sunni-shia marriages are so common because Shias aren't that much of a minority. I think they're like 20% of the population or 30%, and Sunnis are the remaining. Right, so it's not uncommon, but I guess over here in Canada, I think Shias are more of a minority. So like maybe in the Sunni community, it might be like a thing that like
it
a big deal.
Like our relationship is our relationship, and I shouldn't need to justify it, or it shouldn't make sense to anyone else except us and like maybe our parents. So like to for you as not an issue, because again, like she has grew up with Sunnis her whole life. Like there's not much of like a disconnect there, but like once we like agreed to get married, there were little things that like had to be done either a Sunni way or Shia. Like it's like, you know what I mean? Like even in terms of like getting married, or like the processes of like the things that lead up to marriage, whatever it is. So like I feel like during that time we had like some like, is it gonna be this way or is it gonna be that way kind of thing. But for the most part, like I didn't want to upset my parents, he didn't want to upset his parents, and we didn't want our parents to not get along with each other. So we tried to do everything we could to like maintain that, even if it meant like compromising in what we wanted a little bit, just so our parents could be like, okay, fine, like you can have this bit so that you can be happy about this.
Well, the compromise with the actual nikah was we had two nikahs. We had a Shia way nikah, because I guess it's a bit different, and we had a Sunni way nikah, one by her family, one by our family.
And honestly, the process was not that different. It was just something that like my parents said on.
That was kind of the funniest thing.
It was like
we had the Sunni nikah, and then we had the Shia nikah, and then once we had the Shia nikah, we're like, wait, we just did the exact same thing again, like the exact same way recitation. Everything was the same. Maybe the old generation might be different, but with us, it's not like we don't think like, oh wow, like we can't do this together. It's so different. Like you
yeah, I think it just comes down to like being open-minded. And,
yeah, like
you might be dead set and you might think you're 100% right, but just be open-minded. Like, and then you learn something new, and you may see things a certain way, and you may not.
At the end of the day, you come with the understanding that you don't know if you're 100% right. I don't know if I'm 100% right, but this is what I believe. This is what you believe. When it comes down to those like 5-10% of things, I think a lot of this, like even between families, it is due to ego, not necessarily religious beliefs. I think that's where a lot of human conflict is. Like even amongst Muslims, like Muslims believe in almost all the same things, right? But I think there's just the human ego where it's like, I'm better than you, my beliefs are better than yours.
I think in general with both our parents, like I think that like they're more accepting and willing to just be cool with the fact that like that our families have different beliefs to a certain extent. So like, and it wasn't always like that. Like of course your parents and my parents weren't like, oh, you want to get married to a Sunni girl, great, do it. You know what I mean? Like they were like,
Yeah.
they didn't want it to an extent, but like now that we're married and now that we go over each other's houses all the time, we have a great relationship, like it's inevitably, it's just like, okay, like they're a part of our life. And like for my parents, it opened their perspective. It doesn't need to change their mind or change their beliefs, but it widens your perspective about how other people live their life and makes you like realize that like, oh, they're not that different than I thought, you know.
We're very lucky that our parents were very supportive in our interest and like for each other, and they were, there for us in whatever choices. They didn't impose anything on us. My mom, she wears a hijab and a scarf, and most of my family, the women in my family do voluntarily again, because my mom was like, you should marry somebody who wears a hijab regularly, and it was one of the things in her checklist for what she'd want to see in a daughter-in-law. But I was supportive of Aliya not wearing a hijab if she chooses not to. And I explained to my mom that when my mom was in her 20s, she wasn't wearing a hijab either. It was a process by, where she, read more, learned more, went closer to Deen, and she decided that, voluntarily, that she wants to wear one. So I didn't want to restrict my spouse, and I wanted to give her that same option to be the way she wants and to practice her religion the way she wants. As long as we believe in Allah, and we agree that there's one God, and we follow the basic tenets of Islam. And my parents were a little apprehensive in the beginning, but it didn't take long for me to convince them. And it all worked out well.
Yeah, right from day one, our families were involved in, and they were very involved in the entire process of looking and shortlisting through the different options that we had, and meeting people and speaking to their immediate families as well. So the parents' involvement was right there. The agreement was also there. But having said that, we both of us come from really diverse backgrounds in terms of nothing. We have a lot of things that are not common. So we don't have our languages are so different. The customs and traditions are also very different, and each and every the places where we've lived and we've been raised were absolutely poles apart. So all that was definitely something that would be considered as things that we would have to kind of amalgamate and work together, work along with. So there was a lot of small differences that would add up to a very diverse environment, even in our house, in terms of bringing up a family, raising a family.
Yeah, in India, everybody seems to be entitled on their opinion on our choice of spouses.
Yeah.
So we have to be very clear on what we want, and be very polite, and not to offend anybody or to make anyone feel
but at the same time answer those in the light of what we feel. So for example, Munir was directly asked by one of my aunts, which sect of the Indian Muslim community do you belong to? And then what was your answer?
I said I don't have an answer, I'm a Muslim, because we as a family we never had that kind of restriction. We never had a caste or class based last name. Human beings are generally good people, but everyone has some form of bias or the other. It's very hard, and I would say it's
ingrained.
I think everybody is ingrained with certain beliefs and belief systems, and it's up to us as human beings to do that self retrospection and take out those things which are not good for us. So I learned very early up to brush off these things, because I've heard these kind of comments I was relatively a darker skinned person than the most people around me, and it might have affected me in the first few years in school, but I very soon learned to brush this off, and I felt that I had to rise higher than these kind of comments, and I just didn't let this affect me. And I don't hold anything against anybody, because this is part of human nature. Across the past 10,000 years, People have been suspicious of people who don't look like themselves, like them, have different cultures, different, practices. And they've been, in the least apprehensive, and there've been people going out and fighting wars till date against people who thought or believe differently. So it doesn't make anybody a bad person. In the core, I believe every human being has the same challenges of trying to improve themselves, making a better life for themselves and for their families. Everybody who has children wants the best for their children. Everybody wants to work hard and make a better life for themselves. So really, these are some of the core principles every human has. I don't take offense to people thinking or commenting otherwise. But I think we moved here very early up in our marriage.
Within the first year.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I grew up in India, and my upbringing and my family was entirely based in Calcutta, which is in the east of India. Aliya, in turn, grew up in Dubai, where the lifestyle, the culture is very different. So, our first challenge was that, we were thinking if Aliya moved in with me, she would have some challenges in adapting to the environment, which is very different from what she was used to.
Like language, as well as the new place.
Right.
Within the house.
But, it just happened that, I got this opportunity to move to Canada, and we grabbed it. And very early up, so, starting our marriage in a neutral ground where it was a little bit of adapting for both of us. Basically, it just gave the option for us to focus on each other without having to worry about other people around,
it gave us that space also. Family. You're right, because,
We came in here with the mindset of, let's see how this goes. We didn't come in with a plan that this is where we want to spend the rest of our lives, or this is where we want to bring up our children. I was here on an assignment, and that, helped us, I believe, in not having too many expectations. We were looking at it as a clean slate, where we wanted to come in, settle in, and see how we like it. And I think our love for Canada evolved over time, and that bond, only grew after we had our first child here.
That was 2 years after we moved.
Because exactly. So that's the point when we actually decided that, okay, I think we would like to stay here. Just the way the country was so welcoming to us, the way the people around us were, didn't have any kind of biases towards us, and we made friends so easily. And after we had a child, we saw how this society was such a great place for a family to grow. And right early up, we were seeing the difference.
We had a comparison. We could clearly make a comparison between how things were done in his part of the world, how things were done in where I was brought up, and how we could do it afresh, bringing in both our ideas together, merging them together, and have our own, chalk our own path for our children over here on a neutral ground. I think that really sealed it.
Yeah.
Posed a question to me. She's like, have you ever thought about looking into Islam? Because if you want to make a future with me, or if you want to, this is like 2-3 years ago, she's like, you should really at least try to do some research, because one day I'm going to be like my mother, and I'm going to wear hijab, and I'm going to read Quran study, I'm going to pray, inshallah, you know what I mean? And I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'll look into it. I'm like, I love Islam as a people. Like, they're very peaceful type of people, you know what I mean? It's a very peaceful religion, it seems like, and there's like a lot of unity and family orientation, right? So I'm like, okay, I'll look into it. So I went to Salahuddin, and I talked to an imam there, right? And he was kind of telling me, like, answering all my questions and stuff about Islam, and asking me if I've looked into myself. And I said slightly. And I think at that same moment, her brother was there, and we were in the parking lot after I spoke to the imam, and I made the decision that I wanted to become Muslim, because I was like, this is a religion that makes the most sense to me, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I belong here in this religion. It had nothing to do with her. very, very, like, she may have influenced a little bit because I met her and she kind of like shined the light on me in terms of Islam. And I was like, kind of opened my mind to it. But I made the decision to say, yo, I want to be a Muslim.
My mom taught him how to pray.
Yeah, in the
And
beginning,
Quran
my feet were very crooked.
He didn't know how to.
Killing me. I was like, yo, how do you guys pray with your feet bent like this? And like, you guys are sitting on the ground and stuff. I'm like, yo, my thighs are like pure falling asleep. Like, I can't do this. I said, I'm gonna go to Trinidad in February, do what I gotta do down there, have like party, have fun, do all that stuff. And then once I come back, I'm gonna really look into Islam. And then I made my shahada shortly after. And then I think the August of that year, which is 2014, that was when I proposed to him and we got married. Because I said, yo, if I'm gonna be a Muslim, it's like I'm starting fresh, right? Like, I don't want anything to be haram. Her stepdad wasn't really with the idea of me being around unless I was married to her, you know what I mean? That was, at that point, it was like year 4.
So my mom was very accepting. My mom always from the jump said, like, I don't care who you marry as long as they're Muslim. And Chris had mentioned it before about me eventually wanting to end up with somebody who's Muslim. And that's the reason that I brought that up to him. I was like, why are we dating? Da, 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 you know what I mean? Like, this isn't gonna go anywhere. So we might as well just break it off. My stepdad, I think, had his opinions, but my mom, you know, at the end of the day, she's the one who birthed me and raised me, and she's the one whose opinion mattered to me the most. Also, she actually bumped into me and Chris at the mall. Do you remember? Oh my god, it's so embarrassing. That was the first time you and my mom ever met. Ahmed, my brother, and my mom were at the mall, and me and Chris were also there. I introduced him as my friend, but like, obviously they knew. We were walking holding hands, and then after, I heard somebody saying my name, and I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah, I remember that. I feel it now. My hand
dropped his hand. And then I turned around to see who it was that was calling me, and then I saw it was my mom and my brother, and obviously they already saw that we were probably holding hands. They probably been watching us the whole time, but I didn't know. That was the first time my mom met Chris, and even then she wasn't really like judgmental or anything. I thought that she might be, but she wasn't. I think she thought it was funny, if I'm being honest. I remember the first time that I went over to his place and his mom was spying through the door. The door was cracked a little, and I just remember looking that way, and I saw your mom, and I'm like,
wait. No. She's trying to make it seem like my mom's a spy, son. My mom ain't no spy.
Your mom did that though.
You know my mom, because me and her were at the house together alone, right? She probably seen the shoes out front. She came in and she was like, what outside? And then she looked in, peeped. He would tag you. Okay, I'm going.
Okay, but that's just what I saw. The first time I ever saw his mom was peeking through the door. So my dad met Chris at our nikah. So before that, he spoke to Chris on the phone, I think. But then when he physically met Chris was the day of our nikah. I didn't even know my dad was gonna be there, to be honest with you. I told my dad that I would have a nikah, but I wasn't sure if he was gonna be there or not. But he surprised us all, basically. He showed up and he was there to give me away. And that's when they met. And he really changed my dad's mind about, you know, not marrying a Caribbean person. It's really embarrassing to talk about.
It's marrying outside of your race. You gotta understand, these are old school people with old school mentalities, right? So like, it's just like if I'm an old school Trinidadian man and I want my daughter to marry only a Trinidadian person, you know what I mean? Like, it's just an old school mentality way of thinking.
It's really awkward when you're married and you don't have your own space and you're staying with like in-laws or whatever.
Yeah, we had it rough, bro. You know why we had it rough? Because we didn't have anybody giving us money or anything like that to invest in a home. You know what I mean? We didn't know about Baja or none of that shit. So we had to like start from the ground up, you know what I mean? And save up our own money and make our own journey, you know what I mean? If you're in the situation that we were in, one little room, probably like the size of this room, and all we had was one little bed, one little tiny closet. I had to put my clothes on the floor in one little corner and carry a duffel bag everywhere. It was shit. I had to put this PlayStation in my duffel bag, carry it here, carry it to my mom's house. Like, we had it rough, bro. I had to wake up every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning and make sure, like, tiptoe down the stairs and like open the fridge slightly, and then make my breakfast a night before so I can go eat in the kitchen like a hermit crab in the darkness. And then me put my flashlight on my phone and prop it up, like,
All right,
make sure
yo.
like I had it rough, okay? So for anybody that's going through that, it's gonna be tough, but just save as much money as you can, because if the upside to that is we're paying no rent.
I feel like that's motivational. Like the fact all that stuff that you have to go through, that was like motivation to, you know, save as much as you could.
If you have to go through that, don't even save like minimal. Save maximum what you can save. Like, I mean, go above and beyond and eat sandwiches for 4 months, 10 months, whatever it may be, and save as much as you can. Don't invest in a condo. Invest in a house right off the bat.
My mom converted to Islam when I was about 6 or 7 years old. She had arrived to Canada. She was already questioning, I guess, her spirituality, her relationship with Allah. She comes from a Christian family. My father's Christian, my mother's Muslim. But I was raised in a Muslim household.
And myself, I actually accepted Islam when I was about 13 or 14. I had a cousin that was heavily involved with the Nation of Islam. And I really resonated with the teachings of Brother Malcolm X, as well as Luther Farrakhan at that time, and the movement that was happening during the 90s with the Nation of Islam and its introduction to, I guess, like more mainstream society at that time. And I had a really good friend named Waleed who helped me out with my first fast, and I was a bit of a chubby kid, and I lost 30 pounds in that month. So I really saw Islam as some sort of benefit at that time, which was, alhamdulillah, the blessing was, slimming up and getting a little bit fitter. My mother was like, okay, so are you gonna marry that girl? Are you gonna marry that girl? Are you gonna marry that girl? And my mother had never met Gilary. I don't know, like she had heard us conversing once
On MSN?
on MSN or something. Like, this was back when MSN was a thing, so like, I guess we're dating ourselves at that point. But like, she heard a conversation and she just, I don't know, whatever. My mother's a type of person, she goes off feelings, so her instinct and her feeling was like, that girl. And she would like throughout the 10 years, she'd, whatever happened to this girl, so and so, and I was like, whatever.
I think for me, like, I always knew from the first time I had seen him, before we even entertained the idea of marriage, that I wanted to marry him. I always knew this.
A lot of women have that effect with me, man. Like, that's not a problem. Like,
yeah, I always knew it. And so I overlooked the fact that people who were approaching me and saying, oh, Talib would be good for you, that their motivation was because I'm Black, I'm Shia, Muslim, convert. Makes sense. You put the same type of people together, right? Mm-hmm. Then hearing from him, like, once we started to recount that 10-year buildup, I understand why he would say no, because, and how they didn't really know us individually. They didn't know who we were as people. They knew us from their perception, and then we're trying to have us get together.
But I do actually kind of feel differently. Now, I think maybe it was the way they expressed it, the way they expressed their reasoning. They would use, like, she's Black. She's, comes from like, West Indian or like that type of background, and like check off those boxes, because I think that's kind of inherent as, within our community as Muslims. A lot of young people are plagued with knowing someone in their life that's around them that they see at school and has the same interest as them, and they've developed relationships and friendships with, and then that friendship develops into some sort of maybe possible love interest, right? But then their parents are like, this person is from our tribe, this person speaks our language, this person is from our, specific FIP, our jurisprudence, those things. And then they're not necessarily looking at their child as an individual, as a spiritual, emotional, physical being, and trying to find somebody who would be compatible for them. But at the same time, like, these people, they knew me, they knew you.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just they didn't really know how to articulate it properly, and then the way they did articulate it didn't resonate with me at that time. So in my maturity, hindsight is 2020. It's possible that their intention wasn't the way they expressed themselves. So I want to be at least fair to that,
Yeah.
to that aspect.
A lot of my friends at the time who were not Muslim, they were just surprised because like literally I had no relationship and then they had a wedding invitation. So to them it was like, it just didn't even make sense. Particularly because I was on a mission. 2013, I had called it the year of the man I was gonna get married. I was tired of being single. And so like I was doing what I needed to do to be married. And that was in January, and by April I was engaged. And by October I was married. My parents were also surprised by how fast it was, although I had been talking about Talib for a long time. And so when I brought his name up, my mom was like, again, that guy from like so long ago? When she met him, her reaction was like, are you sure? Like she was questioning his.
Yeah.
Like
Actually, there was a point where I was like, are you trying to discourage me from marrying your daughter at a certain point?
She was like, Gilary's hard-headed.
Yeah.
She's loudmouth. She's opinionated. Are you sure? Like that was kind of her thing. But
I think she was trying to protect you.
Yes.
By like, yo, listen, like she's a strong woman. She's not your typical, like, or at least like, you know, within our community, our stereotypical stay at home, take care of the family, take care of the home type of situation. She's educated, she's ambitious, she has goals, she has plans. So like, are you cool with that? I introduced her to my mother as this is the woman that I'm going to marry. You know, hoping in the discussion during the discussions, you know, during the period that we were engaged, that, you know, our parents would not come back with something being like, yo, there's a real concern that I see in my experience as an elder, in my experience as someone who's married. For her, in her situation, her parents were married. And also in our experience knowing you as our child, that you shouldn't do this.
I come from a family that really, like as the children grow, there's a lot of trust given to them. Like it very much, we've given you all the tools that we can, and now it's your turn to figure out, right? And like if you need some support making this decision, always our doors open. But it was never a suffocating relationship. I remember vividly at 16 wanting to go on some kind of a school trip and being reluctant to ask my parents because they were very strict up until that point about me doing anything overnight. And I came and I asked my mom, and she said no. And I said, okay. And she's like, that's it? You're not gonna advocate for yourself? You're not gonna fight about it? You're not gonna convince me that this is a good for you? And I feel like that was kind of when she saw me as going into adulthood, and that's when that relationship around my decisions really changed. Yes, she was always there to talk things through with me, think about the pros and cons, but
she was preparing you to be an independent person,
right,
to make your own decisions.
So when I came with Talib, she was like, okay, you've chosen him, and I trust that you made the decision with sound mind. Like I said, she was just like, be prepared, this one is mouthy. But that's about it. There was ease in the relationship. It was a very easy relationship to be in. I felt like we gave each other space to be our full selves. But I think it was difficult to be vulnerable. Like you're just exposed all of a sudden. You have a mirror to yourself. There was this constant clash about the wife that I wanted to be versus the wife that I was expected to be, or I thought was expected of me. So in our early years of marriage, there was this tension of I'm career focused. I want to have my independent life. I want to continue to have my friend circle. I don't want to change that about myself, but I'm also bombarded with messages about being home with your husband and being obedient and cooking and cleaning. So I was just dealing with
things that I never actually had expectations
he never
of.
had expectations of. But something happened when I got married that all of those worlds kind of collided. I also didn't have real examples of marriage. My mom divorced my father when I was very, very young. I was maybe 2 before she came to Canada. And so I never grew up in a house with my biological father. She remarried when I was about 7 or 8. And it was a good marriage. It wasn't one of those marriages where it was clear that they had love for each other. They cared about each other's well-being, but there was no real spark. They took care of each other. They didn't really fight. It was a good home to be raised in, but there was not the kind of romance that I expected out of my own relationship. There wasn't a spark that I had hoped for my relationship. So I think a lot of it for me was process of elimination. What are the things that I like about my mother's relationships or relationship that I'm seeing now You know, what are the things that I enjoy about it? You know, that's what I want in a man. What are the things that I don't think is healthy or don't think is good? And I kind of really reflecting on how some of the women around me were in relationships and what I wanted from it and what I didn't. My mother is a convert, so she knew relationships from her life when she wasn't Muslim, and then she knew the rules around what you were supposed to do as a Muslim. There was a disconnect for what the reality was in North America for a young woman who was raised here, but raised as a Muslim and was trying to pursue a marriage or a relationship within parameters that had been set out for her, you know, in a book. And I'm not talking about the Quran, but like books around marriage versus what she knew growing up in all her relationships. So it was just like, there was just all of this disconnect around relationships in my home that I had to really try to sift through it all and figure out what is it that I want and need.
You know, personally for me, like I guess my biggest difficulty too was the fact that like I didn't have any examples of marriages around me.
Yeah.
Both of my parents, they never married, and then they separated when I was like 5. None of my aunts or uncles had ever other than my mother's one sister, you know, who's been married, you know, for 40 plus years now. At that time, other than her, I didn't really have that many examples, and I didn't have the example like directly with my parents. I always had the desire from a young age to get married and have a family, but like no one gave me the game plan. There was no man in my life that sat down and said, "Yo, this is how you select a good wife and mother for your kids, and then once you've identified her, this is how you go and get her. You know, this is how you attract her. This is how you treat her. This is how you have discussions about marriage to make sure that what you saw and you were attracted to is equal to what it is that you actually want, you know, in terms of a wife and mother for your children." If you look at most mainstream, you know, if you want to say television and movie representations of Black people, there's no Black Muslims or Muslims really in general, and there's very few positive representations of Black families. And I talk to my wife about this all the time, is that like for me, not having those examples, I was saved by television. The Cosby Show was like my roadmap. Somehow at a very young age, I was able to like look at that show, look at the relationship between Cliff and Claire, and be like, yo, that's what I want. I wanted that for my family. I wanted to leave a legacy of marriage and healthy relationships for my kids so that they could see it, know, you know, what to expect, what to demand. And then on top of that is like I wanted to be able to, like, when they're in the process, when, you know, they're young, maybe 18 or 19, and now they're starting to have, you know, desires for, you know, the opposite. And I want to be able to help them navigate that situation. Some of the marriages that happened around me was, you know, they started dating and then they had kids, and then it was kind of like, why not? Or, you know, and like that's not what I wanted. I wanted there to be a solid foundation in my marriage before I even started bringing children into this world.